Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of In the Corner. I'm Cash. Today we have episode 112. We're going to talk about the fights that happened this weekend. Some interesting ones. Diego Pacheco had a win over Kevin Lele Sadjo, but it wasn't too impressive. Badou Jack lost to Noel Mikaelian in their rematch. So Mikaelian now reclaims his WBC belt. You had the final ever UFC on ESPN card where Brandon Royval got knocked out in the first round by Manel Kape. We're going to talk about that. A little bit controversial. And then PFL Lyon, where we had Vadim Nemkov submit Renan Ferreira in one round. So a lot to talk about. But before we get into that, we're going to start with Ilia Topuria. So he announced this morning that he's going to be stepping away from defending his lightweight title to focus on the issue he's had. We know that I believe they're married. He and his wife are seemingly getting a divorce, and apparently he's saying that she's now accusing him of domestic abuse, or at least has been threatening to go on and accuse him about that. So he's in a very sensitive legal case, apparently, with his ex-wife. I'm not sure if they're divorced yet, but it seems like he's doing something that definitely needs his full attention. I don't know how much of the domestic abuse stuff is true. He's saying it's completely untrue. She hasn't accused him yet, but apparently she's going to. So I don't really need to get into that. But essentially the important part is he's not going to be able to fight for a while. He needs to have his priority with his family resolved first, and I completely understand that. So I'm not really mad at him stepping away. And I especially appreciate him saying, I'm not going to be able to defend the belt for a bit, and saying, the UFC, do what you got to do. And not holding up the division. He says he doesn't want to do that. So we know, obviously, January 24th, we're going to have Patty and Justin fight for the interim belt. I don't know if this means, by him saying I'm going to be stepping away, if this means I'm not going to fight until 2027, saying he's going to take the whole year out, or if it's going to be long enough at least that he would need to vacate. We'll see if the UFC does decide to strip him. If so, I expect we'll hear about it this week if that is the case. And then Patty versus Justin will become for the full 155-pound title. And then winner of that would fight Arman Tsarukyan. And then whenever Ilia is ready to come back, he gets an immediate title shot, of course. That's what I would assume is likely to happen. At least that's honestly what I prefer to happen. I don't think that we need to have an interim champion defending, this year. I mean, if Ilia says he can't fight for a minute, just take the belt away from him, and then when he comes back, he can become a two-time champion, and it means more. So I think you just strip him for now, let him do his thing, and then if Patty versus Justin fight for the full title, and puts much more stakes on the line, and then the winner of that would, of course, have to defend against Arman Tsarukyan, and then that kind of solves your problem with Arman having to wait for a while, because he would get the next title shot instead of waiting for the winner of that to fight Ilia, and then Arman wouldn't get the title shot until the end of 2026. But let's talk about the fights that we had this weekend. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, Diego Pacheco beating Kevin Lele Sadjo. I thought it was an okay performance. I thought the first half of the fight was very, honestly, kind of uninteresting. It wasn't really exciting. It was hard to, really get into. Diego Pacheco obviously is such a long reach and a big height advantage, and he was using that to his favor. I mean, the first 4 rounds, I gave him all to Pacheco, and then I thought Sadjo came into the fight much better, and then after round 8, when Sadjo lands a big knockdown on Pacheco, that really changes the fight. And then from that point on, it became very, very close. Pacheco looked gas. Going into the 11th round, I had it just about tied. Pacheco was still winning by a smidge, but that knockdown made it much closer. I had it 6-4, but really 5-4 with the knockdown. And then I thought that Pacheco did a really great job of cleaning out those final 2 rounds and staying on top. So I had him winning 115-112. He definitely rallied, dug deep in the final 2 rounds to get the win, but overall, not the performance we wanted. These were 2 undefeated guys. We were hoping the winner of it would come out in a very, impressive fashion and be like, wow, this guy deserves to seat at the top 5 of super middleweight. He's that guy. Give him a title shot. We didn't really get that. Sadjo is still by far Pacheco's biggest win after last night or Saturday night, and he's also his toughest fight. I think it ended up being in the ring. And Sadjo's not done. I mean, I'm already seeing people talk about Mbili versus Sadjo. That was a fight that was ordered earlier this year. Didn't happen. I would love to see Mbili and Sadjo fight because I think it would be the stylistic nature of it would be awesome. They're both just 2 very aggressive, come-forward fighters. They're both French as well, or I think Mbili lives in Canada. You could do that one in Canada. It would do very well, or even in France. But yeah, that's a good fight you could do. Sadjo may have to move down a little bit just because he is, on a loss now. But as for Pacheco, what comes next? He calls out Jaime Munguia. I prefer the Jaime Munguia fight. The Ring magazine then posted right after saying that they have learned, again, they are the promotion, they are Riyadh season, so it's not like they've been informed anything. As soon as Pacheco beats Sadjo, they post saying the Ring has learned that Riyadh season is very interested. It's just such funny wording in staging Hamza Shiraz versus Diego Pacheco with the target date of February 2026, likely on that AJ card that's been talked about for Valentine's Day. As for that fight, I mean, obviously, you look at the two guys, they're the two tallest and lengthiest guys in the division. It'd be fun to watch them fight, but we all know who wins that. Shiraz, I think, would maybe even be able to stop Pacheco, at least at this juncture. I don't think Pacheco is ready. I think that we learned that. Pacheco's good, but I don't think he's ready to go into a world title fight. Shiraz has been ordered to fight in Billy for the vacant WBC World Championship that was just stripped from Terrence Crawford. That's the fight you make. That is maybe the best fight in the division. Between not between Canelo or Crawford. Those are the two best guys at 168, you could argue. So I say you do that. Pacheco, not entirely sure. I mean, I would honestly prefer the Munguia fight. I think that's a much more winnable fight for him. And Munguia is still a top 10 168 pounder. So I think it's a good fight. I would much prefer if they just ran Munguia versus Pacheco in California. It would do very well. Co-main event there, Joe Cordina beats Gabriel Flores Jr. Not even really competitive on my card. I had him winning 117-110. Not even close. Cordina did have a point deducted from him at some point, but I only had him losing 2 rounds. The judges definitely had some hometown judging for Flores. He didn't win on any of the cards, but one judge had it 114-113 for Cordina, meaning that they gave Gabe Flores 5 rounds of the fight, which is just absurd. He won at max like 3, and that's honestly being pretty generous to him. So I did not really think that the judging was on point in that fight, but it is what it is. Cordina gets the win. He's likely to be installed as number 1 for Abdullah Mason now. It was a really fun fight, and I mean, you just look at the lightweight picture. You look at Mason versus Noakes and then Cordina versus Flores, both of which went all 12 rounds and were phenomenal fights. This was definitely the best fight on the card, and now you get the winners to meet. So give me Abdullah Mason, Joe Cordina next year. Maybe it's on a Saudi card. I don't know, but I think that really is a very good and interesting fight. And I think Cordina would be a tougher challenge for Mason than Noakes was. And Noakes was already a great challenge. So I'm down for that one. Tito Mercado had the only stoppage of the main card, getting a knockout in round 6 over Antonio Moran. He looked really good. Dropped him in the first round and then again in the 6th to close the show. He's a very, very good prospect. I guess you could call him a contender now at 140. I think he's 18-0 with 17 knockouts. I am curious what kind of fight they throw him in next. I don't think he needs to go jump into the big fights. He called for the winner of Shakur and Teofimo. No, you're just not ready for that yet. I do think that he can be there in maybe a year or two's time, but for now, take your time. Let's see what they can do. Jermaine Ortiz, I know he's going to go and fight Richardson Hitchens, it seems, in January. If he's not doing that, I feel like that's a phenomenal matchup for Tito Mercado. Be a very, very tough fight, but if he wins that, he'll get a lot of credit. So I thought he looked good. Sky Nicholson, another dominant unanimous decision win over Julian Avila. I won just about every round. I had her losing 1 round. She'd been very aggressive in her first 2 fights at this new weight, much more powerful, stopping both her opponents in like the 2nd round, I think. Now, it seems like she's kind of regressed to the more typical Sky Nicholson, where she's kind of boxes for points, and that's okay. Not exciting, but it's okay. And she did that and got the WBC interim title here, so she's now mandatory for Ellie Scottney. That's a fight that we need to see. Scottney's likely going to go for undisputed next, and then Sky Nicholson should get she should get the undisputed champion. Arturo Cardenas had a good performance over Cesar Vaca. Cardenas, he's had a lot of shaky performances, in my opinion. A lot of his last fights, you can argue if he even deserved to win them. But here he gets a knockdown over Vaca. I had him winning 97-92. I thought he looked pretty good. Again, another good rising guy at 122. Not sure who you put him with next, but definitely a solid win for him. Chev Clark had a little bit of a questionable performance. Did not look great against Anthony Holloway. Holloway retires after the 4th round. He's like so tired. He falls off his stool in the corner. So definitely a little bit scary. So I hope he's okay. But as for the fight itself, Chev Clark did not really look awesome. I mean, this was his comeback fight after the 2 losses in a row to Mosqueda and Vidal Riley. And he got rocked in there against a guy who was 9-9. So not really a great performance for him. Put him in there next year again. I already saw somebody saying he should fight Pat Brown, so I don't think you sacrifice him to Pat Brown yet. put him in there with someone maybe like, I don't even know. I feel like the British cruiserweight division, everybody's already fought already. He could fight Isaac Chamberlain. I don't know if they've fought each other, but that'd be a good fight. That's probably what I would say. Yeah. Noel Mikaelian beat up Badou Jack. I wouldn't say beat up, but won widely enough. I had him winning 115-111. So I thought that he looked pretty good in there. They both had points deducted. It was a much less close fight than the first one. The first one, it was questionable about who won. I think I actually had Mikaelian winning the first one, or I had it to draw. Jack got the decision, but in this one, it wasn't really a question. It was Jack had some success in the middle, but Mikaelian had a great start and a great finish, and yeah, won the majority of the rounds. I think I gave him 8 rounds. So yeah, not really much to say about it. Good win for him. He gets the WBC title back. As for Badou Jack, I think he should retire from here on out. There's no point in continuing. There's no point. He's still a top 10 cruiserweight probably, but he's 42. You don't need to do it again. You don't need to get a world title. He's had a great career. As for Mikaelian, I would love to see him fight Jai Opetaia. Opetaia immediately called for that. They both just fought. They're both fresh. It's a unification fight. WBC and IBF and Ring Magazine belts on the line. And then the winner of that fight could go and fight Zerto for Undisputed. That just makes all the sense in the world to me. That's what should be next. Look, it's very clear. Zerto does not want to fight Jai Opetaia right now. Jai Opetaia should fight Noel Mikaelian for those belts. Opetaia probably beats him, and it'd be a great fight. So that's what I say should be next. Genuine pro debut on that card. He did have a pro fight with Le'Veon Bell on the Misfits card, but it's not like a real pro fight. This one was legit, and he got knocked out in the first round. Yes, it was a little bit rough. I like a lot of the Misfits guys, and he was someone who, when he first debuted, had a lot of promise, and I think he's 1-2 in Misfits, but all tough. Both those losses were against very tough opposition. They were close fights. He fought really well, I thought, in Misfits, and this just shows the levels. You go up against a guy who's just a decent pro, but you know what? Good for him. He dared to be great, and he, came up short, but that's okay. But it was a pretty good stoppage, yeah. Moving on from that, let's talk about some MMA. UFC, the final UFC Apex event of the year, final UFC event of the year, the final UFC ESPN event ever has concluded. The era is over. Let's talk about the fights on it. Main event was Manel Kape beating Brandon Royval by knockout in first round, or TKO, I should say. A little bit controversial. I'm not overly mad at it. If you watch it, it's like, that's a fair stoppage. He got dropped, and wasn't really responding. Afterwards, he's completely fine, sure, but in the moment, the ref did the right thing. I'm not mad at it. It does suck for Royval. That's 2 losses in a row, but a good one for Kape after, a lot of inactivity in the past year or two. But as for we talk about what's next, there's a possibility we see him fight Joshua Van on February 21st on a fight night. Yeah, Joshua Van called him out, said, let's fight February 21st at the I think it's 21st at least, but he wants to, on the UFC Houston card, which is a fight night headlined by Strickland versus Fluffy. Don't know if that's still going to happen, if that's at all even talked about. We don't know yet on this Paramount Plus deal because there's no more pay-per-view. Something that a lot of people have talked about is like, well, if there's no pay-per-view, there's no need to only have title fights on numbered events. You can have them on fight nights. It doesn't matter. It's all the same price. So that is a good point. They could do that. I doubt that they will. I do think Kape could be in line for the next title shot. I think it's likely Tetsuro Taira. At least I believe it should be. And then Kape can wait out for a bit. I think what you do is Pantoja may take a while. What you do, and whenever he's ready, he gets a mini title shot. But let's just put him on the sidelines for now. You do Van versus Taira. We just got announced. Also, we'll talk about it later as part of this card. But February 7th, the Apex co-main event is going to be Kyoji Horiguchi versus Amir Albazi. Winner of that fight fights Manel Kape, and that winner will be in line for the title at the end of next year. That's what I think you do, but who knows. You had Kevin Vallejos stopping Giga Chikadze in the second round. That was actually a pretty good round from Giga in the first one, and then the second one, pretty big knockout for Vallejos, so that was a good stoppage. Cesare Oleksiejczuk, very dominant, grappling over Cesar Almeida. His card had it was weird. It was both very Apex, but also not. Kennedy Nzechukwu and Marcus Buchecha having the most boring heavyweight fight going to a draw is the most Apex thing you could imagine. But then you have Melquizel Acosta fighting Morgan Charrier and knocking him out with a head kick in round 1 in one of what should be considered one of the knockouts of the year. Who's phenomenal. He's on a great run. just those main fights are crazy. And then you had King Green, who had a very disappointing performance over Lance Gibson Jr. just because he was showboating. It wasn't that good of a fight. One judge gave it to Gibson, which I'm not sure how you do that. But you know what I mean? The Apex card was very hit or miss. Joe Anderson Brito had a decision win over Isaac Thompson. Yaroslav Amosov submitting Neil Magny in the first round. Very impressive debut. So he could honestly get a ranked fight pretty quickly. He passed the Neil Magny test on debut. So, former Bellator champion. He's got a good future. Steven Asplund, huge win against Sean Sheriff. That was a great fight. They were just going at it all of 7 or 8 minutes that it lasted. He had a very successful UFC debut. Very interesting story. He used to weigh 500 pounds, now weighs 260. So it's crazy. He's got a crazy build, but yeah, he was a true dog in there, and so we'd love to see that. And also you had Jamie Lynn Horth getting a first round TKO over Teresa Bleda. That was a also notable stoppage on that card. So I enjoyed it. You did have Lemos Fritz Robertson get pulled off the card day of. I think it was like some kind of injury or something to Lemos, or she fell ill. I'm not sure, which sucks because that would have been a pretty important fight for the strawweight division, but it is what it is. Let's talk about PFL. PFL had their last card of the year in Lyon, France. And I thought it was great. Main event, Vadim Nemkov submitting Rehanan Fajera in round 1. I mean, he was at a huge size disadvantage, but also a huge skill advantage and experience. And just, Vadim Nemkov, former Bellator light heavyweight champion. Now he's a PFL heavyweight champion, takes down Rehanan Fajera but 20 seconds into the fight and just, doing his thing on the ground and then finishes him. Great win. Obviously, it's clear what's next for him, and that should be Francis Ngannou. Ngannou said that he's down for it, so that should 100% be next. If Ngannou is going to keep on fighting with the PFL, if everything falls into place, there's no doubt in my mind that that's what the next heavyweight title fight should be. But, a lot of stuff has to fall in place for that to happen. If not, you do have Oleg Popov, who won the World Tournament in 2025. He's also in line for that title shot. So, a lot of good potential fights for the PFL to do. I like that one. Co-main event, you had Cris Cyborg doing what we all expected her to do, and that is beating Sarah Collins. Collins actually was a little bit more competitive than I was expecting. I still didn't give her any rounds, and then she got finished in the third with another submission. Cris Cyborg's longevity is crazy. She's still doing all this, and I think it's like 5 or 6 organizations she said she's now held a title in, so just absurd. Well, the most interesting part of her fight was she wins featherweight title and then calls out the flyweight contender who really should be champion because they just haven't had her fight for the belt yet, Dakota Ditcheva, and says, let's meet at bantamweight. Now, obviously, Cyborg and Ditcheva are the two biggest and really the only two female superstars that the PFL has. So it's a no-brainer. It's like, well, those two fighting would be huge. The only issue is that they're 2 weight classes apart. Ditcheva, I'm sure, could move up to 135. Cyborg moving up to 135 moving down to 135 is a bit of an issue. That could be very unhealthy of a weight cut for her. When she's definitely a full-fledged featherweight. If she thinks she can do it, maybe, but you also can't ask Dakota to come all the way up to 145, so it may be one of those things that just doesn't work out. But if it does, it would be a crazy fight for the PFL to make, but I don't know if I see that happening. Patrick Habirora, first-round knockout, huge performance. That guy's going to be a superstar. He and Boris Atangana, who went out of the first round for, I think, the first time, or only like the second time, second-round submission win for him. They both looked phenomenal. Great Belgian gym out there. And Habirora is a very, very good fighter. Atangana is just a powerhouse. Love it. Taylor Lapilus had a decision win, unanimous, over Liam Giddens. Open up the main card. I thought he looked pretty good. Alex Chizov finishing Connor Hughes in round number 3 to win the tournament for PFL Europe, and then Boris Adi Guzel finished Dean Garnett in the first round. Very controversial stoppage. Knocks down Dean Garnett. And then, Garnett is trying to get back up, and the ref is already in the process of waving it off, but in that time, Garnett is scrambling to grab a hold of his leg, and it's like, dude, you probably could have let that one finish. Like, Garnett wasn't even that hurt, and he was immediately ready to continue, and you literally had to pull him off him to stop the fight. That's not really, I don't know, a little bit disappointing. You also had Gustavo Oliveira get a very impressive second-round knockout, and because of that, he, of course, got called out by Boris Adi Guzel. Maybe that's a fight you make. What's going to be important in PFL with this big new direction is you want to be able to make rankings, and you want to be able to have a lot of good fights between contenders. That's one you can make right now. Adi Guzel versus Oliveira. Book it. Why not? BKFC had their final event in the UK of the year, and that was in Derby. Connor Cook stopping Anthony Holmes after the third round to win the UK light heavyweight championship. I think a lot of weird decisions on this card. Not to say they were weird in like the actual decisions made. It was unusual to have like 4 or 5 fights go the distance on a BKFC card. Usually get so many knockouts, but overall I enjoyed it. Nothing too much of note to really talk about. Because the main fights all went the distance, but it was overall a pretty fun card. And we got one more this year in the Mohegan Sun, and that is going to be the final BKFC card of the year. And then finally, the last fight we'll talk about, Jose Salas beating Landale Nzeke in the 7th round by TKO to win the IBF Bantamweight Championship. I watched it. Pretty good performance from Salas. Won just about every round leading up to the stoppage. And he now holds a title in Bantamweight, which is a fantastic division. You got Takuma Inoue holding the WBC. You've got Seiya Tsutsumi holding the WBA championship, and we'll talk about that here in a second because he's going to be defending this week. And then you've got Christian Medina holding the WBO. So Medina versus Salas, already you got 2 Mexican Bantamweight champions. That's a unification right there you can make, and that's a huge fight. So lots of good stuff to come about, and we're going to talk about some news that happened this week. But before we do that, let's talk about the fights we got this week, because it's a huge week of combat sports. We've already got a lot of stuff on Friday and Saturday and even Sunday, but we've also got a few fights this week. Starting on Tuesday, we'll have MVP Showcase number 2. And so it's 2 because they already did one of these that was in, when they do it. I think, it was during the Taylor Serrano 3 fight week where they had a fight week card at the Oculus in New York. This time they're doing one at the Live nightclub after the open workouts. So on that card, you're going to have Nat Dove back in action. You're going to have Luan Medeiros, and you're going to have Shannon Courtney. All those fights are going to be 6 rounds. So just 3 nice little fights. But then on Wednesday, you get into the big fights, and that's where we talked about Seiya Tsutsumi versus Nonito Donaire is going to headline a world title triple header in Japan. The final Japanese, actually no, that's not even true. I keep on thinking everything, okay, well, if I'm talking about it, it's got to be the last one of the year. It's not. We still have another Japanese card on December 27th, and that's not the Inoue one I'm talking about. That's in Saudi Arabia. Masamichi Yabuki is fighting December 27th. But December 17th, you've got Seiya Tsutsumi versus Nonito Donaire for the WBA Bantamweight Championship. You've got Anthony Alasquaga versus Taku Kuwahara for the WBO Flyweight Championship. And then you've got Kyosuke Takami versus Rene Santiago for the WBA and WBO Light Flyweight Championships. That is a unification. And then you got Seijo Yuriakui back in an 8-rounder against Vincent Lacar, moving up to 115. So we'll see how he does there. But as for the title fights, it's going to be mostly Team Japan. The usual suspects. Tsutsumi is going to beat Donaire. There's no way he doesn't. Tsutsumi's an absolute animal. I love the way he fights. And look at Nonito Donaire. I think he's 41, 42. He's definitely still not overly washed or anything, but it's just when you put him in there with a young guy like Tsutsumi who's been on the run that he has, it's hard to think Donaire wins that fight. And then co-main event is going to be probably Takami versus Santiago, this unification. A good fight. I think Santiago is a much, much underrated fighter than a lot of people give him credit for. I thought he beat Mamba Gonzalez, and then he had a great win over Iwata to win the title earlier this year. But we have to be honest, at the end of the day, I do think Takami is better than him. I think that Takame is just going to beat him. I don't know if he stops him or anything, but he's undefeated, 10-0 versus the 14-4 record Santiago holds. Should be a good fight, but I got Takami unifying in just in the first defense of his title. And you got Anthony Olasquaga, who I actually am not on Team Japan for. I think he'll beat Kuwahara. Kuwahara's pretty good. He did challenge Seijo Yuriakui last year and lost by unanimous decision, so he's already getting another title shot. So he's got to be pretty decent. And his only losses actually do come to Akui, which is interesting. So good fighter, but I think that Olasquaga is also one that's kind of underrated at times. He's not the best champion, but he's had some good wins here and there. So I think that he wins that fight, and that should be a really fun card. The only issue, we don't know if there's a U.S. broadcast. In fact, I don't know if any broadcaster's been announced for outside of Japan, which is definitely very frustrating because we all want to watch that card. Another card that we don't think we'll be able to watch in the U.S., that is Tim Tszyu, Anthony Velasquez. Tszyu's comeback fight. I'm shocked he's coming back this quickly. This is his 3rd fight of 2025. The guy just refuses to stay inactive. You look at Velasquez, undefeated American, 18-0-1 with 15 knockouts. This is a very, very tough fight for Tszyu to take. Well, I shouldn't say that. I do think Tszyu wins this fight, but it's tough for him to come back so quickly, quicker than Fedora's coming back, and then automatically jump into, an undefeated big puncher when he's had issues there in the past. So I don't know, but I do think Tszyu wins this fight. I hope he does because I want to see him keep going. And he was the guy at 154 a year and a half ago, and since then he's been 3-4, 3 out of 4. So just not a great run, but let's see if he can get everything back in order on Wednesday. And it's a shame that there's no U.S. broadcaster because this fight card just came together in about the last month or so, and it's already looking really solid. Co-main event, Sam Goodman versus Tyler Blizzard. Blizzard's undefeated Australian fighter. Goodman obviously coming off his loss against Nick Ball. Moving back down to 122, it seems. Maybe he's trying to get in away. Not sure. Blizzard's good, but I do have to think that Goodman should be a strong favorite here. You got Callum Peters stepping up to 10 rounds in just his 5th pro fight, fighting Cody Beacon for the Australian Middleweight Championship. Cohen Mazoudier fighting Dominic Molinaro. Fawcett versus Romeo. Reda versus Telepe. All of these are 10 rounds, so a lot of decent fights on that card. I'm excited to see Tim Tszyu back in action and Sam Goodman. And then you've got in Matchroom in London also on Wednesday. So 3 decent cards on Wednesday. You've got their last UK card of the year. Headlined by Giorgio Vizioli against Joe Howarth. This is for the vacant English lightweight championship. Howarth 14-1, Vizioli undefeated at 9-0. Yeah, I mean Howarth is a decent prospect, but you have to think Vizioli's going to beat him. Vizioli's one of the top prospects in the UK. I think this is kind of his, I'm sure they literally just put this card together just to keep their guys active and to get Vizioli a headline fight. Shows you what they're trying to do with him. I think he's going to have a very big 2026, but for now, I think that he beats Howarth quite convincingly. Co-main event is the fight that I'm more interested in. John Hedges stepping up and fighting Elizoro, defending his English Cruiserweight Championship. Elizoro is a guy who's kind of, not had the best run of form in the last few years. He's lost 3 out of his last 4. The only one he won was a 6-rounder against a journeyman, in which he went the distance. But as for his last fight, Alloys, very competitive fight. A lot of people thought he edged the win in that one, or at least got a draw. So, considering that this is John Hedges' first real test, of opponent, he's got to win it. He's got to look good, and he's in deep. So let's see how it goes. You got Taylor Bevan fighting Mickey Ellison over 8. TMA Ayton fighting her first 8-rounder. At least, is it her first or is it her second 8-rounder? Yeah, it's her first 8-rounder. She's fighting Ana Carla Vaz de Moraes, who's 7-1, so not bad there. Lily Buttigieg is in an 8-rounder. And then you got the returns of guys like William Crawley coming off his first loss, and you got the return of Adam Maka, Maisie Rose Courtney, and the debut of Connor Mitchell, who everyone is very anticipated for in the UK. He's probably going to be a huge ticket seller. Matchroom's very excited for that. So, decent card there. I think there's like 10 fights on this or something crazy, so should be good. Moving on from that, finally, we'll talk about. I may do another episode on Thursday, but before Thursday night. But I'm not sure. It may end up being on Friday. But just in case, Ramon Cardenas returns. His first fight since the loss to Inoue, in which he put in a great effort. He's fighting Eric Robles, who is 16-3. This will be a super bantamweight fight. Eric Robles, I think he's like he has a win over Lee McGregor. So it can't be that bad. I think he's a former IBO super bantamweight champion. So pretty good fighter. And, he's in here fighting Ramon Cardenas, who's also a great fighter. So I like that fight. You do have to think Cardenas would win, but he's going to be in tough. And you got Hibert Conceição Sosa, who's a very good Brazilian fighter. His first 10-rounder against Paul Kroll, who's 12-2, so undefeated versus undefeated there. Mike Juan Williams bouncing back against his first loss versus Moran. He's going to be fighting Jair Voltaire. And then, guys like Kenyan Valle having his second fight. Obviously, the Valle brothers are very popping on Pro Box TV. Brian Polacco versus Marlon Harrington. It should be a fun one. It should be a pretty fun Pro Box card. The final Pro Box card of the year on a Thursday night. Glad they moved it to Thursday so it didn't clash with Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua, because that would have sucked for them. And so let's talk about some other news we've got. Dana White and Nick Khan went to the USA Boxing amateur event this week, and this just kind of showed oh man, they're going for the heart of boxing. They're going after amateurs. Not that sounds bad, but what I mean by them going after amateurs, I don't just mean going after to poach potential new signees, because that is probably what they're doing, but they're also apparently what they're doing is they're negotiating to get the rights to broadcast those. The USA Boxing, which is big, because if you can put that out there and get a lot of people watching it, you can start the promotion of these amateurs before they even hit their pro career. And then when they make their pro debuts, it's actually a much bigger deal. So I think and that's a big thing in the UK. We don't see it as being as big of a deal here in the US, I feel. So, them getting the spotlight on those young amateurs coming through the systems, it will be very, very big. And when you think about it, TKO's playing the long game here. They know they're not going to be able to get they're not going to be able to get the current WBC champion to come and fight for their Zuffa boxing belt. They can't do that. What they can do is they can go after the people who are coming up and don't have that deep connection to the WBC and the WBA and all that stuff. And they can get them to come and say, hey, why don't you come over here? We're just like the UFC. Because these young people grew up in school with UFC being the poppin' thing, not boxing. So that is a pretty smart move to go after the younger generation because they're not going to have the top fighters right now. When they're going to have the top fighters, it's going to be 5-10 years down the line, and so you need to go after the next generation now before Queensberry and Matchroom and Top Rank are. Apparently, Arslanbek Makhmudov is an option for the Tyson Fury comeback that is looking like it's going to be April. I don't mind that at all. After Makhmudov beat Dave Allen, there's a lot of talk about him being next for AJ. I wouldn't mind if he got that fight either. Those are the kind of guys I'm expecting their comebacks to be. You don't want them to go in there with a Fabio Wardley. Some people are saying Fury could fight Wardley why would you have a tune-up fight be against a current world champion who is far more dangerous right now than Anthony Joshua is? That doesn't make any sense. You're choosing the more difficult fight for your tune-up. No, that's a terrible idea. Choose someone who's, top 20 to 30, not top 1 to 5. And yeah, so I think that makes sense. I obviously would like someone else maybe, but I would really have no issues if it was Fury versus Makhmudov. Another potential fight being talked about is Devin Haney, Lewis Crocker. Bill Haney was at the event on Saturday talking to Eddie Hearn in hopes of making a unification with Lewis Crocker. I think Devin Haney's got a lot of good fights out there. It's probably got to be with Matchroom because he's got Jack Catterall in them. I think Catterall's the best potential fight, but if he wants to unify, Barrios isn't available right now. Romero is unlikely going to be available. Why don't you go for Lewis Crocker? Crocker is easily the most beatable champion, maybe in the sport right now. Like, he's probably the worst current boxing world champion. So, and Devin Haney is one of the best. So I definitely have Devin Haney beating him if they were to unify. And so I don't blame Bill Haney at all for trying to get that fight. It's a very easy and quick path to getting to unified. And then he's already definitely the best welterweight, but then you really have show because you got two of the belts. Apparently, Erica Cruz has failed a PED test, and Amanda Serrano is reportedly looking for a new opponent for their January 3rd fight. This is definitely unfortunate. Nobody likes a PED cheat, of course, but these things happen. It's not been confirmed. This is all just a report. So it's possible that Cruz didn't fail it or Cruz failed one, but they're going to B-sample and she's still going to be able to fight because their first fight was great. I would still like to get the rematch. But, it is what it is. We'll see what they end up doing in this situation, but we should hear news on that pretty quickly. Not sure who Serrano would defend against, but lots of options at featherweight. We did mention Fabio Wardley. Frank Warren saying that his first defense is likely going to be in April. That's what they would like to do. And that they're open to doing Derek Chisora. I mean, honestly, I don't hate it. I would love to see Wardley versus Dubois. That's a fight that somebody suggested, and a lot of people are agreeing with it, saying, like, yeah, they should totally do that one next. But I'm not sure if that happens. I just don't really see it. But, you could do it. You could do Wardley versus Chisora. I think that's a very... It's weird because I think that Chisora actually does have a chance in that fight, and it's also a very dangerous one for him to go out on because he could hurt himself. Wardley is a killer, but also, going out on a world title shot is kind of a good way to go, especially if he somehow wins it, which I don't think he will, but I didn't want Chisora to get the shot against Usyk, but when it's Wardley, I'm okay with it. I'm very okay with Wardley Chisora. For UFC 326, we're hearing that Renato Moicano versus Brian Ortega is in the works. Weird fight. Ortega finally coming up to lightweight and getting a shot at a top 10 lightweight is a little bit like, why are you deserving of that? I don't get it, but he also does have a name, and, I think Moicano, has he lost his last two? I think he's lost his last two, so, I'm not overly surprised. I don't overly hate it. And that does belong in a pay-per-view card, so we'll see how it goes. AJ McKee versus Adam Borges has been confirmed as the co-main event for PFL Madrid on March 20th. Great fight there. I love it, and yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm going to keep on saying it. I'm very excited for PFL in 2026. I think they have a lot of opportunity to do better things next year than this. It was confirmed that Mario Bautista, Vinicius Oliveira will be the main event for UFC Vegas 113 on the 7th of February. Good fight, an important fight at the bantamweight. Bautista coming off the loss. Vinicius Oliveira recently ranked. He's been a little bit of a hot prospect, so that's a good fight. And then we talked about Albazi, Hiroguchi, co-main event. That one should arguably main event because the winner of that may be in line for a title shot. Definitely the better fight that I think more people will be anticipating. But I'm excited for that. And you got Michael Oleksiejczuk versus Marc-Andre Barriault. And then you got Ryan Spann, Rizvan Kuniev. And then you've also got Julius Walker fighting Uran Satibaldiev. So honestly, a pretty good Apex card, all things considered. I'm looking forward to it. And then they also confirmed that standard tickets will now be available for fans at the Apex events, meaning that it won't just be 100 or so people from, the UFC friends and family. It'll actually be a lot of fans in there that you can buy tickets for. I have no idea how expensive they'll be, but starting in January, you'll be able to buy tickets for those events, which I think is a obvious mistake that the UFC has made and not making that more available is having more fans in the Apex. That's the biggest issue with it, is that it's so quiet. There's no one there, so this will hopefully fix that. Ilia Topuria, we talked about at the beginning, saying that he wants to switch to boxing at some point. This is a tale as old as time. All of the fighters, all the MMA fighters want to switch to boxing at some point because they realize that the pay is just so much better in boxing. And they think, I'm one of the best strikers in the UFC. I'm one of the best boxers. Why would I not be a good boxer there? And then you just look at the evidence. How many UFC champions have gone on to become boxing world champions? For men, at least. None. So, I don't know if anything happens with it, but I'm sure at the end of his career he'll do a Jake Paul kind of fight. Not a Jake Paul because he'll have much longer left in his career, and Jake Paul's way bigger than him. But somebody like that, he'll end up doing a fight with, like another MMA fighter in boxing. We'll see. But Tom Aspinall also said that he's down for a boxing match with Francis Ngannou. Here's an idea. Why don't you do an MMA fight with him? Because you guys are both MMA fighters. It just makes no sense. Obviously, if he is going to fight him, it's going to have to be in the PFL or boxing because Dana White is not letting Ngannou back into the UFC. Ngannou was trying to set that up last week, and Dana shot it down saying, nah, he's not coming back. It was finally announced that Lawrence Okolie is going to be fighting Ebenezer Tete on December 21st. It's been shifted, and now David Adelaide's off the card, and now it'll be Tony Yoka fighting Patrick Corte. So two pretty good heavyweights against very suboptimal opposition. Really, really disappointing, but I'm also not surprised. It's just how boxing is. It's also confirmed that Elvis Ahorga versus Harley Ben is on that card. That's actually a decent fight. I mean, I don't know if Ben has really done much at all in his pro career, and then Ahorga is a guy who, has gone on. He's fought guys like Callum Simpson and Tyler Denny, and, and came up short in those fights, sure, but he's got to be at a decent level to be able to get in those fights. So I actually like that fight a good bit. I'm curious how this card goes, but I don't know. I just hope the production's better, but the promotion has been terrible for them to announce the actual fight. Literally, what, 6 or I'm not even trying to make a 6-7 joke, but like 6 or 7 days before the actual fight. So yeah, very, very poor promotion. Some Queensberry news. They've signed Lyndon Arthur away from Wasserman. Wasserman losing another top fighter. I shouldn't say top fighter, but one of their top fighters. They lost Josh Kelly, too. Now Lyndon Arthur, not looking great for them. But, Queensberry just cleaning up that 175 division. He obviously did last fight on a Queensberry show, so it's not a huge surprise. They also announced that Andrew Kane will be fighting Alejandro Gonzalez in the ordered WBC bantamweight final eliminator on February 7th. Makes a ton of sense to get Kane back out. This will have been almost a year since he last fought. Not sure why he's been inactive, but you're getting him out here, back home in Liverpool in a big fight. WBC eliminator for the title. I like it. They also, it was not announced, but is on BoxRec and been, confirmed. Joshua Pagan will be fighting Jamel Herring on January 22nd in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Caroline Vera will be fighting Delphine Persoon for the vacant WBC Featherweight Championship. So, some good fights. Those are both great fights, actually. Vera versus Persoon is very good, and Pagan versus Herring is very, very good. So, I really like both those fights. I'm excited that we're going to be able to getting them, this early in the year. I don't know why it hasn't been announced yet. I mean, Salida has announced the February 22nd card with Clarissa Shields. They've not yet announced this one, which is coming up in just over a month's time, so should probably get on that. The PFL announced they've signed former Glory light heavyweight champion Donegi Abina to the light heavyweight division. Again, very excited for PFL next year. They're making good signings, good fights, and light heavyweight's becoming an interesting division. It really is. You got a lot of very talented and good players there. And then lastly, top tier confirmed the main event for their February 15th card, which they're doing rollout announcements for, will be Thiago Muxonga fighting Asenia Byfield for the Commonwealth Silver Super Welterweight Championship. I believe this is Muxonga's third or fourth fight. Already in a 10-rounder fighting for a Commonwealth Silver title, which, doesn't mean a whole lot, the title itself, but just the idea that you're fighting at that level for a title very quickly in your career shows, they believe in you and you're probably pretty good. So excited for that card the day after Valentine's Day. That's all I've got for today's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoy this week of fights. A lot of good stuff. Last big fight week of the year. And then we're gonna be back on Thursday or Friday, probably Friday, to talk about the big card. Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua going down Friday night. And then Saturday, you've still got Misfits Mania, Andrew Tate versus Chase Demore. Huge card that one is. Then you've also got stuff like Simpson versus Williamson, Richards versus Aziz, the final BKFC card, another Salida Promotions event. So 3 months, they're going back to back to back. A lot of stuff to be excited for. Oh, and you got the Nigeria card we talked about with Akoli and Tete. So, thank y'all so much for listening. Have a good rest of your week and peace out.